لله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء وأشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. From the amazing personalities in the history of Islam that we want to learn about, that we want to discuss today, we're going to be discussing about one that has a very special place in my heart. Why? Because it was one of the stories that inspired me very early on to try to change my life. So, inshallah, we'll talk about him. But before I mention who he is, I just want to explain that he is somebody from the very early Muslims, and he was there, as Al-Dhahabi and others have mentioned, he was born during the time when Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma used to teach. And he ولد في زمن عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما. And he narrated a hadith directly from Anas ibn Malik and other Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So he met the Sahaba, and he was a companion of the likes of Hassan al-Basri and Ibn Sirin and some of the great early scholars. But the difference between him and what we find in many of the other great scholars that we've spoken about is he didn't come from a pious background. And we'll talk about his background and that in a minute, inshallah. But the point, inshallah, I want you to keep in mind is never look down on people because they may be away from the religion or they may be caught up in something, because you never know, they could turn that life around and be better than you and me. So always have husn dhan, always think good about people, always hope good for people. Don't think this guy is hopeless or he's beyond hidayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide whoever Allah wants. And never become complacent about yourself. Oh no, I'm good, I'm already on the deen, I already did hajj, I did umrah. No, doesn't matter. If Allah doesn't keep you on the right path and Allah takes you away, you could be from the best families and the best knowledge and all of that, and you'll end up on kufr. May Allah protect us. So keeping that in mind, this great scholar of Islam, Ibn Hibban, he says about him that he is thiqa, he is strong in hadith, he is reliable, and he says that he used to write the mushaf. So one of the main sources of income for him was that he would write out the Quran by hand, and it would take months. At that time, they didn't have printing presses, it wasn't like online apps. So the Quran, so imagine how strong his Quran was. This is not only for his own recitation, but this is what he would do all day long. He would write out the Quran. And Al-Dhahabi, in one of the kutub in Tarikh al-Islam, not in Sir Alam al-Nubala, he says about him, he was from the Zuhad of the Tabi'un, and the Zahid from those that didn't love this world, from the Tabi'un, he was from the people of Zuhud, and Akhyar al-Salihin, and he was from the best and the most virtuous of the pious of that time. And imagine if you're talking about Tabi'un and you're saying he is from the Zuhad of the Tabi'un and the Akhyar al-Salihin, like how much of a status he must have in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Interestingly, he is somebody who is not of Arab descent. He is somebody of Ajam, non-Arab descent. Some of the ulama, they said he was from an area of Sinjan, which is in current day Iran. But very interesting, I found many of the ulama felt, like in Al-Kamal, fi Asma al-Rijal, Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, he says that one of the opinions was that he was from Kabul, which is in current day Afghanistan. Sometimes we forget the history of Islam in Afghanistan or in Hind, and these areas goes back to the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. His father was captured as a prisoner of war. We get a lot of questions from kuffar about captives of war and this and that. But his father wasn't tortured, he wasn't taken and put in concentration camps or killed like other people at the time. Instead, he was treated so well that he accepted Islam and he was freed, and his son became a very powerful figure in the police or the military network of the area. We'll talk about his story a little bit, but I'm just giving the background. So understand, subhanAllah, even though his father was taken as a prisoner of war, but the Muslims had such great mannerisms. They treated even their prisoners so well that he accepted Islam and he was freed, and he became in such a powerful position that his son later will talk about what his status was. From the people that he used to report a hadith from is Ahnaf ibn al-Qais and Sa'id ibn Jubair and Hassan al-Basri and Muhammad ibn Sirin and Qasim ibn Muhammad. Many of these people we've spoken about in these series. Now, his past is recorded by some of the ulama, but I wanna be clear because we like to always base things on clarity. This is not mentioned in the kutub of Tarajim. And when you look at the books like Al-Kamal fi Asma al-Rijal of Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, which I mentioned already, it mentions him. It mentions his strength in hadith and his memorization and his piety and his zuhud. Al-Dhahabi has mentioned him in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala and in his Tarikh and in other books of Ilm al-Rijal, Ibn Hibban, and almost across the board, because he's a reporter in the ahadith, in the well-known books of hadith like At-Tirmidhi and so on. So because of that, even Imam al-Bukhari in his Tarikh al-Kabir, he mentions him and mentions his strength and his memory and his piety. But this story about his past is not mentioned in those books. It is mentioned in some of the later books like Muwaffaquddin ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi in his Kitab al-Tawabin. He mentions the story. In that story, he mentions that he was asked himself. Now interestingly, because sometimes when you talk about somebody's past, people say, oh, don't talk about your past, or why are you talking about your gangster days or whatever. But this is one of the stories that really inspired me. So he himself tells his story. He tells how he came to be. And the person, his name is Malik bin Dinar. Malik bin Dinar, the famous scholar from Basra, even though Basra was his location, but like I said, he wasn't from there originally. That's where he settled. Malik ibn Dinar is very famous. When I said his name, all of you recognize him. But his story is not so famous. In one of the narrations, as Muwaffaquddin ibn Qudama mentions, he says that he was asked about his past. And he said that he used to be a part of the police. Now, he wasn't a regular police officer, as researching the story in other books as well. The Jazari and others have mentioned the same story. But what seems to be more correct, elite unit, the Amawids, or whatever, they used to use to arrest political prisoners and make people disappear. So it wasn't like the police that would stand around and, enforce laws. It was part of like a secret service or, the FBI or CIA or KGB or whatever. And he was part of an elite unit. Now, subhanAllah, even though his father was a prisoner that was taken in war, but he was that high up that he had a lot of power. But unfortunately, that came at an expense. And many times, when you are involved in such politics, it comes at the expense of your religion. That's why many of the earlier ulama of Jarh wa Ta'deel, when they would see somebody who used to narrate hadith start to get a job with the police or so on, they would stop narrating from him. Because they would feel that at times he would be compromised, because if there was something about the virtues, for example, the Abbasiyya, they would exaggerate in certain virtues, and the Umayyah would exaggerate in certain fadail, and they would not like to hear the opposite. So sometimes you get compromised in that, and that's why great scholars like Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayh, he would not take the salary from the government, nor would he take official appointments. When he was told to be the Qadi of the Qudah, the head judge, he didn't take it, because he felt that would influence his decisions, and he was even in prison for it. That's how firmly he didn't want to take it. Nowadays, people be trying to sell them scholars for dollars quick. They'll be jumping for it. But the ulama of the past were different. Now, when Malik bin Dinar used to work for the government, he was not a student of knowledge. In fact, he himself says that I was a drunk. Now imagine, this is like the early generation of Islam, but these things were there. Don't think that evil disappeared. No, but it was just a much better time than ours. But if you want to find evil, you'll find it anywhere. Some people think, okay, you just go move to another country and khalas, you're going to become salih. That's not the way it works. Any country you name on the map of the world, I'm sure you can alcohol and haram there. But you have to change yourself. So Malik bin Dinar at that time lived in such a pious time. It was a time when Sahaba were still alive, when the likes of Hassan al-Basri and others were teaching hadith in front of people, but he wasn't interested. He was an alcoholic, as he says himself. And he used to miss salah. But that's interesting because he condemns himself for that. Today, even many people that consider themselves very good Muslims barely pray. And then you see some brother, you tell him, mashallah, let's go make salah. Like, brother, my heart is clean. At that time, subhanAllah, even the drunk, corrupt, enforcers of cruelty, even they would make salah. So, he himself says that I was given to drinking. And he didn't get married, but he had a slave woman from whom he had a child. And he loved her. And he loved the child as well. And the child was a little girl. Some of the ulama of tariq, now this is not in the kutub with asanid or the kutub of rijal, but these are ulama that have mentioned this as a reminder, ibratan. They said that the girl, she was a baby, but the fitra was there. So when he would have cups of wine, if she would see it, she would spill it on him. Even though she was a child, but she had that fitra. And he loved her so much that he didn't care. But he would still go back to drinking. And for a time, he loved his daughter so much that he gave up drinking. Like he gave up alcohol. Because he felt like, okay, I'm a father now, I need to be a good role model and so on. But she died as a child. She became sick and she died. Allah wrote it. So when she died, he went into a depression. And he was already a corrupt man. And whether he was a bandit or an assassin for the government, whatever. But he was corrupt. So he got further into that corruption and he got further into drinking. He became an even worse drunk. And he himself says that one night I was drunk and I missed Isha. I didn't even pray Isha. And I went to bed. He said, and I saw a dream. And in that dream, I saw the Day of Judgment. I saw that the trumpet had been blown and the qubur, the graves had been emptied and people were raised and there was that hustle and bustle, that stress of the Day of Judgment. And I saw behind me a huge monster. Many of the ulama translate it as a dragon today, but in Arabic, something that was big and scary. And it was chasing me. And it was fierce. And in one of the narrations he says it was a blue-black. It was like the darkness of a night. It wasn't even like, like when I say dragon, sometimes you think like Chinese cartoons and stuff. No, it was just a huge, scary blackness that was following him. Volumat. And when he was running from it, he couldn't find any way to escape it. Until he saw an old, weak, elderly man who was dressed in a very nice white cloth. He was dressed very decently, very elegantly. He looked like a respectable person, but he was weak and old. He told the old man, help me, help me. The old man said, I would love to help you, but I'm too weak. I don't have the strength to fight that monster. I can't help you. But if you go that way, there is a place where there are Muslims and you will be saved. So he ran that way and a voice came and told that monster that was chasing him that this is not for you. So the monster went back, but then he came back around. So now Malik bin Dinar is running in his dream and he comes to a side of a mountain where there are children that are there. And one of them that comes out, it's his daughter. He sees his daughter, the one that had died. And she gives him nasiha and she advises him and she reads Quran to him and he's shocked. And he tells her, can you read Quran? Because she was very young. She said, here we all read Quran. And she told him that we are the children of the believers who died as children and we are waiting to intercede for our parents on the Day of Judgment. When you think about this, sometimes something harsh happens in your life and you, na'udhu billah, give up hope. Or you say, why me? Why did Allah test me with this? Why is my child not healthy? Why did my child die? Why did this have to happen? You don't realize realize sometimes that's the best for you and the child. Now that daughter will never go through a test in her life. She is from the people of Jannah. She made it. She will enjoy her life in Jannah like anybody who's successful. Not just that, she will be a means of intercession for her father on the day of judgment. And her mother. As we know, the children that die young, and when the parents are patient, if they are patient, the child will be dragging them into Jannah. So sometimes in life something happens, and you take it as bad, but in reality it's good for you. But we don't know. There is no such thing as a problem of suffering or problem of evil. Like people always ask this question, if God is so merciful, why is there so much death in the world? Well, the life was meant for death. I mean, this life wasn't, who told you you're going to live forever? Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Allah wrote this life for death. You did it, this life is terminal. If you think you're going to live forever, go read the Quran again. And how long will you live? Which one of you got a guarantee being born? Did you get a paper? A warranty? You're going to live 100 years, 80 years, 70, no sickness? No. Everybody has a different test. Somebody's test is half an hour, they're born, they die. Khalas. They are the most lucky ones because they will never have to be tested in this dunya. They die as children, they go straight to Jannah. But for us who live past puberty, we are the ones that go through a test. Some of us, may Allah make us all successful, we pass, but some of us fail. So when children die in Gaza, don't think that this is something that is going to be how could Allah let it happen? No. Of course, we have to stop it, we have to stand for justice, but know this, that those children will be in Jannah. So his daughter, she gives him this nasiha, this advice. And when he realizes the gravity of what's in front of him, when he wakes up, he makes tawbah. He goes, he breaks all the wine bottles and glasses and cups, and he makes tawbah. And at a later age, now this is very important because this inspired me. He didn't start seeking knowledge like Hassan al-Basri as a child. Hassan al-Basri, his mother used to be the khadima of the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was raised as a little child, hearing hadith from the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. But Malik bin Dinar wasn't. But that didn't stop him from becoming one of the great scholars of hadith, one of the great scholars of zuhud. Yani he is famous, his statements are famous. Why? Because he changed that life around. That's why we all have hope. No matter what you're struggling with, from sins or whatever, you have hope. If you're alive, Allah has given you that opportunity. He changed his life and he started to study hadith. He started to memorize Quran. He started to write out the Quran until he became so proficient that he was from the people that would, for a living, write out the Quran. In months and months when it was finished, he would sell that mushaf and he would live off of it. And this is something that he chose because it allowed him to always be connected to the Quran. Even for work, he was with the Quran. And he was from the memorizers of hadith. He used to memorize a hadith in the kutub of the Sunnah. We find narrations from him in the ilm of rijal. We find his tariq and his biography. Now, what is very important about him? There's two very interesting incidences that I want to mention from his life. Entire books have been written about him, so I can't cover him completely. One of them is when one of the umara, one of the kings or people of power, people who were royalty. So not just like the Umayyah, it wasn't just like the Khalifa and his kids. No, if you were from Banu Umayyah, you had strength, you had power, you had royal treatment. So one of the princes, he was walking through the streets with like a boastful attitude. He had his chest out, he looked up, he was flexing, as we would say today. And Malik bin Dinar, when he saw this, because now he had separated from the Umayyah, he was dedicated his life to knowledge, he wasn't known to them. He wasn't like somebody who was famous, because he used to love zuhud. So when he was walking and he saw this, he told this royal, he told him, unless you're in jihad, unless the enemy is facing you, you should never walk like this. There is a time and place for it. I mean, I want to be clear, as his statement mentioned as well. Some people think that Muslims are always going to be like, no. There's a time when you put people in their place, you know. There's a time when you stand your ground. There's a time when you flex, like Abu Dujana. There is a time when you will show your strength. But it's not all the time. At this time, you're walking through the streets of Basra. Who are you flexing to? Right? So, when he tells him, he goes, this is the way. If you walk like this, aren't you afraid that Allah will take you to account? Aren't you afraid that Allah, the one who deserves that honor, the one who is the master of that honor, will ask you, why do you want to compete with him? So that man, not realizing who he's speaking to, he told him, do you know who I am? Do you recognize me? You know, this is, subhanAllah, human nature doesn't change, you know. Till today, we have the same mindset. You know, you see somebody, okay, you're going the wrong way. You know who you're talking to? Who are you? You know, the same thing we say today. You know, as if we deserve some special treatment, you know. Us as Americans, we're the worst at this, to be honest, you know. We go to other countries, you know, and then we assume everybody has to speak English, you know. And then like somebody is standing like, I'm American. Okay, so what? You know? Listen, people have this mindset, oh, you're from a royal family, so what? You're rich, so what? You're famous, so what? So you're just a regular person. So Malik bin Dinar, when the man told him, do you recognize me? Do you know who I am? Do you understand who I am? Malik said, yeah, I understand you really well. I got you. You are somebody who came from a sperm drop that if it got on your clothes, you'd wash it. That if it was left, it would stink. And you will end up a dead corpse that will smell so bad, only the earth will accept you. That if you're left above the earth, people will get stinky, they will push you away, nobody will want to go close to you. And between that sperm drop and the grave, you are walking around with your feces in your belly. You're like a bag of on 2 feet. I'm translating it. That's who you are. I recognize you. That's who you are. SubhanAllah. Look at the humbleness of even the people that people criticize. Look at the humbleness. He didn't tell him, oh, arrest him, torture him. He told him, Wallahi, you're the only one that recognizes. You have recognized me, that's true. That is who I am. He took that nasiha. Malik bin Dinar has a secondary, and these, by the way, this story and the second one I'm about to mention, Imam al-Zahabi mentioned in Siyat Alam al-Nubala, and the ulama of Tariq have mentioned it in his tarajim, in his biography. He was a person of zuhd. He didn't care about the dunya. So he didn't have anything in his house. His house was empty. But a burglar, somebody who wanted to steal from his house, broke into his house. So he was making salah at night. And he realizes that somebody's in the house. And he continues his salah. And the burglar, he goes, he opens cabinets, whatever, I don't know, pots or whatever they had to store things. Nothing was there. He looks around, nothing. So Malik bin Dinar, he makes the scene, he finishes the rak'atayn, like, praying 2-2 at night. He tells the burglar, he goes, did you find anything? He's like, no. He goes, let me give you something more valuable than what you were looking for. He said, what's that? He said, go make wudu and we'll make salah together. So he tells the burglar, go make wudu, we'll make salah together. The burglar is like, I can't even rob the man, but he said, I guess I'm here. So he goes and he makes wudu and he starts making salah. They start making salah together. And he keeps praying with him until it gets close to time of Fajr. Then he tells the burglar, look, it's up to you. I mean, I'm not going to harass you. If you want to go, go. If you want to stay, we'll go for Fajr together. And the burglar's like, let's go. So he goes out and he's going for Fajr. And the people see him walking with somebody. And Malik bin Dinar didn't like to be around people. He was like somebody who liked to be alone. So people said that's strange that we find him with someone and someone we don't even recognize. It's not like he's walking with Ibn Sirin or Hassan al-Basri or something, right? So they told Malik bin Dinar, who is this friend of yours that we don't even know who he is? And how have you taken him as a friend? So Malik bin Dinar said, he is somebody that came to rob us, but we stole him. He came to steal from us, but we stole him. Away from that bad life. And he prayed Fajr with him. Some of the ulama of Tariq said that he continued to stay with him. He made tawbah, that burglar. And then he started to learn hadith and so on, even though we don't know much about him. and we don't know his name or something like this, but ulama have written that he was somebody who made tawbah because of that interaction. Now these are a couple of the incidences from his life. He was somebody that continued to be a student of hadith, somebody whose aqwal, whose statements are still mentioned in the kutub of zuhud. A lot of people have made up a lot of fabricated stories about him. And unfortunately, a lot of people have made up stories about him. But this is why I always went back to the books that mention rijal and that are authentic from the scholars of hadith for these. The last thing I will mention about him is one of the things that's mentioned about him in the kutub of tarajim, those that mention him and his biography as a reporter of hadith. That at a time, somebody asked him a fiqh question. They told him, where should we put our ihram and where should we start when we're going for hajj or umrah and so on. So he told them, this is the place where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it from. This is the place. So the man said, in trying to impress him, he said, I'm going to start from before that. I'm going to put the ihram on earlier. Or I'm going to start from before earlier from there. So he told him, no, because if this is the place, then this is where you should do it from, because that's where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it. He goes, yeah, but I want to do more. Are you stopping me from doing more good? So he told him, no, I'm stopping you from destruction, because if you go against what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has shown us, then you are not more pious, you are destroyed. Because this will become a bid'ah, an innovation. And those that indulge in innovations, they're destroyed. So if you know that the Prophet ﷺ did it one way, don't think you should do more or less. Do it that way. Which shows his firmness on the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So these are the people that should be great examples for us. Because sometimes if we weren't raised as children in madrasa, if we weren't raised around ulama and environments like that, we think, yeah, that guy can do it, but not me, because I'm too far behind. But then you look at the likes of Malik bin Dinar, who much of his adulthood was a drunk. But subhanallah, when he made tawbah, he changed his life such that he didn't let any excuse get in the way of his learning Quran, or his learning hadith, or his adopting zuhud, or his amr bil ma'ruf, or his inviting towards good, or nahy munkar, or forbidding the evil, or leaving the haram, or sticking to the sunnah, or stopping the bid'ah. He didn't let any, and he didn't say, oh, people will say, I remember you when you were doing this or that. So, no. When he saw the right path, when Allah opened the way for him, he went on it, didn't look back, and continued to go on that path till, subhanallah, Allah raised his ranks, that we're speaking about him more than 1400 years later. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make these Salaf al-Salihin, these earlier great scholars of Islam, to be our role models, to be those that we look up to. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us, no matter how much good we're doing in our life, we have struggles, we have sins, we have mistakes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us from such gatherings to leave such sins and actions, and whatever good we're lacking in our life, to make these gatherings a means of bringing that into our lives. Jazakumullahu khair. I don't know if the food is ready or not, so we'll take it.
Do you just X? You just hit X to end it? I don't want to delete.